How we doing, everybody? We're back at it with our latest Straight Outta Flushing podcast here, the New York Post Sports YouTube channel. I am your host, Tyler Ward, and that is my amazing co-host that you guys all know very well, Dexter Henry. And today we're going to be breaking down all the key storylines of Mets land, headlined by the fact that Francisco Lindor is back. We're going to talk about Lindor's return to the Mets lineup and what this means moving forward. We're also going to get into a lot of other player standouts, not only from the offensive standpoint, defensive standpoint, pitching headlined by Kodai Senga. And we're going to wrap up the show by doing what we've done lately, and that's talking about the World Baseball Classic. So, Dex, how you feeling today, my man? And are you ready to lock in and get this podcast started?
Hey, man, I'm feeling good. I'm ready to lock in. I'm ready to talk about Francisco Lindor. That came a little earlier than we thought, Wardy. So the vibes are good. Vibes are good in Mets land right now. Vibes are good.
Vibes are good. You know, at the time of us talking, the Mets just took down the Blue Jays in their latest spring training game, too. Everything's been going good in Mets land lately. We're not going to complain about that. So let's go right ahead, and I need to know your immediate reaction to finding out this morning at the time of us recording, damn, Francisco Lindor is back in the lineup for the Mets right after just doing BP with AJ Mentor. I knew that Lindor would return before spring training ended, but I did not have this on my bingo card. Dex, how you feeling?
Yeah, didn't have it on my bingo card either. How am I feeling? Great. This is the greatest surprise you could have gotten if you were a Mets fan. Look, I knew he was going to come back as well. That's what I had been hearing too. But to see him come back here at this time, right? You got to love it if you're a Mets fan. So I'm just excited that he's healthy. We know Francisco Lindor has traditionally already been a quick healer. And boy, did he show it again here. But to do the work that he did in the back, right? And then to actually get on the field and play in a game on Sunday and go 1 for 3, right? And score a run and also have a strikeout. You liked what you saw from him there. Look, he looked good at the plate. He looked comfortable. I was about to call him the captain. I know we're not supposed to say that, Steve Cohen, but he is basically the captain of this team. Yeah, I know, Wardy. Tell me to be quiet. But look, I liked it. I just love seeing the fact that he's healthy, that he's going to be able to get reps in, that he's going to be good to go for opening day. This is huge for this team. I know we're going to get into it more, Wardy, in terms of how it impacts the roster and the decisions that we just talked about a couple of weeks ago. But look, I'm excited, and I was shocked. I did not think that when I got up today that I would see the alert that Francisco Lindor will be playing already. I was thinking, okay, maybe it'll be next week. Maybe he gets a couple of games in before they break camp. But here we are, and if you're a Mets fan, you got to be feeling good about this. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great for all the exact same reasons. And then you add in the fact that how he looked with the eye test, again, he looked perfectly fine. The one thing we noticed is that with his follow through of his swing, he was dropping his one hand off the bat, which is not something he typically does, but you could clearly tell he was doing that because of the hamate bone surgery. And he wasn't grimacing. He wasn't doing anything to make you think he was uncomfortable. It was more for precautionary reasons than it was anything else. And you see not only the single that he had, but he smoked that well over 100 miles per hour. That was a really hard hit ball, one of the hardest hit baseballs for the Mets in their victory against the Blue Jays. And now seeing Lindor back a week and a half away from opening day, Dex, what is so important about this is that now we have a greater grasp, if you didn't know already, as to how the Mets are going to be going about configuring their bench for this season, okay? Because when you look at how the Mets were going to have the year begin, if, say, Lindor was not really playing any games until opening day, you would suggest right away that's a lock that they're going to have a backup shortstop on their bench right away. Because why wouldn't they? You're going to maybe even have that guy get the opening day start if Lindor is 100% ready. Well, now that Lindor is going to be a week and a half, of full of reps before getting to opening day, the argument can most certainly be had that the Mets are in a better position than ever to do something that they normally don't do. And that's begin a season by not having a true backup shortstop off the bench. Right. What's your thoughts about that?
I think they're in a better position to not do it. Listen, this all sets everything the way the Mets would want for this roster going forward. It is more than ideal when you know that Francisco Lindor is going to be there, and they don't necessarily have to worry about that. And here's the reason the Mets don't have to worry about this that I think is good, and you and I have talked about this a lot, Wardy. It is the positional versatility that they have on this team right now, whether it's in the outfield or it's in the infield. But once you have Lindor back in the fold here, it allows you to explore more of that and not have to worry and say, okay, we have to make sure we have a backup shortstop here. So I actually think this is a good thing for the Mets. I think it's going to be good for their roster construction and how they want to leave camp and start this season. I think it's great. So this, it's not just about, obviously, having Francisco Lindor's bat in the lineup. is huge. And obviously, everybody wants to see him get off to a quick start and everything. But it's about what it does in terms of being able to make the decisions that need to be made on this roster. So, look, I like it. I think it's good. Here's the thing, though. We can say all this, and we love the positional flexibility and the roster flexibility and all that. We still have a lot of questions, right? And we still need to see players that are playing new positions, whether it's Jorge Polanco, whether it's Brett Batty, even Carson Benge, who we're going to talk about later. You're still going to need those guys to produce in that certain kind of way. And look, if Lindor goes down again or has any kind of setback at another point, that could change it. But for right now, the way this roster can be, you don't have to worry about that. And I think it's a blessing for the Mets and how they want to construct this team.
Absolutely. And we know that constructing this roster was going to be a tall task for David Stearns after what was nothing short of an utter failure in 2025. Seeing so many things not work from a defensive standpoint, from an offensive standpoint with the clutch gene, to every facet imaginable on the pitching end. He had to roll up the sleeves and really dig deep to build this roster pretty much in certain ways a 180 heading into the season. And to give credit where credit's due, while we still have yet to see what the results are going to be, the eye test has been promising this far, and you really don't have any qualms as of now with just a week and a half or so as we get set for opening day. And as you alluded to already, Dex, we talk about uncertainty in these respective positions. You brought him up. Let's hop right into the discussion. It's Carson Benge, okay? He's been an uncertainty when looking at him as a top prospect and not necessarily knowing what you're getting at the major league level. But there's also a great argument to be had that what we're seeing with Carson Benge doing in spring training right now is kind of a continuation of what he did last year. And you shouldn't be surprised when you see him have the immediate impact at the major league level that many fans, including myself, expect him to have. So what has been your immediate reaction and takeaway from Carson Benge's continued success this spring training?
The immediate reaction for me has been, and I think back to the first episode we did together where you talked so much about his poise, right? And you said that's what made you confident that he can really succeed at this level. Well, boy, are we seeing it, right? He is leading the team in hits throughout spring training, seeing that from a rookie. And look, I just want to say for the fans out there, Wardy and I don't want to put words in Wardy's mouth, but I know he generally rocks with me on this. We're not saying to take everything out of spring training. But what I have been saying and what Wardy's been saying is, how does he carry himself? How does he handle all this stuff? How does he handle working through things? How does he handle, moving around, learning from other guys? I want to see all that. So for this young man to come in here and lead the team in hits through spring training, be a professional at the plate, soak up everything that he can from other guys, I love it. It shows me that he's ready. I believe that he's ready. That's what I'm taking so far from this. I believe that he's ready. I think he is ready where he could be the starting right fielder on opening day. At worst, he is a fourth outfielder off the bench. I don't think that's a bad situation for him either, but I think he's ready for the big leagues in a way that, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't so sure about. I wasn't necessarily as confident as you were, Wardy. I wanted it to be. I was encouraged by the things that you said, but it's one thing to say you like the confidence. It's another thing to then see the young man go out there and produce. Granted, it's spring training. We get all that, but production matters. At some point, it matters. Now, he's going to have to produce if it is now and when it breaks camp, coming up to the big leagues and hitting. But for right now, it makes me say, the makeup stuff that Wardy was talking about was spot on, and he's handling this well, especially when he's had competition. He knows he's in a competition with Mike Tauchman, and he's handling this well, still leading the team in hits. You got to love it.
Oh, you have to love it because this is the risk the Mets took, obviously, entering the season, having an open spot in their outfield for a top outfielder in their prospect and Benge. And that's something where you swing and miss on Kyle Tucker, even though you put in a valiant effort there. You had levels of interest in Bellinger, but nothing really materialized the way that maybe some fans, including myself, thought it would at the time. So you say, okay, you bring in Luis Robert, who we'll talk about in a little bit here, as well as, just making sure Tyrone Taylor returns for defensive certainty at minimum. But having that open spot in right field and constantly being reaffirmed from both David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza, letting us know that we're giving every opportunity imaginable to this kid to go ahead and run with it. Now's the time to do that more than anything, too. Like, we have to give credit and pay kudos to the great success the Mets had in their minor leagues this past season, okay? They were one of the best teams in all of baseball. Outside of the Boston Red Sox, when looking at certain levels of success, success as well organizationally, the Mets were, the best, if not one of the best in all of baseball last year across various levels. And Benge was a fixture behind that. But Benge is just the start of this new wave of talent that you'll be seeing. Offensively, it's not just going to be him. You're going to see guys like AJ Ewing this year, who has looked fantastic this spring.
Very
Ryan
excited about him.
Clifford, who will get reps at first base sooner rather than later. You think also on the pitching end in the Ryan Lamberts that we'll talk about later, the Dylan Rosses, and you think of the Jonathans, the Christian Scotts. I mean, there's a laundry list of players, but they're all knocking on the door and they're all going to be impacting as soon as this season to varying degrees. So for the Mets, you might as well see what you have in this individual now, give him a leash to run with it, because he may very well be the best option for you versus any option that you maybe could have picked up, not named Kyle Tucker, this past year's free agent market.
So to that point, Wardy, right? That comes down to a lot of trusting in your system, your development, and not to take a word from the Sixers in basketball, but trusting the process, right?
Right.
It's one thing to have the pipeline and the high ratings and the farm system and all that, but are you going to trust the process and give these guys the opportunity to develop so that when they are ready to come up, and then the support, which you and I have talked about a lot with some of the changes to the coaching staff, have that support so that they can succeed, right? And something I believe in a lot is competition is either going to make or break people. And we talk about that with Carson Benge, and he's in the competition with Mike Tauchman. Well, he's risen to the occasion here. That matters a lot for me because there's going to be rough days that are going to come for this young man, Carson Benge, if he's going to be successful as we think. He's going to go through slumps. He's going to go through some valleys. We are hoping there are more peaks than valleys. We are absolutely hoping for that. But these things are going to come, and how we can handle a competition early on now, how he can make adjustments to Major League pitching, those are things we're going to be watching. And so I think the Mets should be commended for putting him in a good situation, a good environment where he can succeed. It's early. Yes, he's got a lot of work to do, but they have to, if this is the plan that is going to come for younger players to follow him. You just talked about an AJ Ewing. You talked about a Ryan Lambert, a Dylan Ross, right? We haven't even mentioned Christian Scott coming back off the surgery. If there's a plan in place for these guys and a good culture and environment for them to succeed, then you should, as a Mets fan, be really excited about these prospects and what they can do. And, it would be nice for the Mets to see this, particularly with positional players, because we know the history hasn't been that good, especially the outfield for the Mets. It'll be nice to see that. And if this could happen starting with Carson Benge, it'll be pretty dope.
Listen, if we had to go through the trials and tribulations of trading Jared Kelenic at a time where he was such a highly coveted prospect, it worked out in the end for the Mets. No doubt about it. When you trade and part ways with the PCA for, a second half's Javi Baez just to get fans to be upset with a thumbs down movement, okay? And Trevor Williams for the next year and a half after he was solid. Appreciate Trevor, always.
Appreciate
to now set up today that you traded Drew Gilbert at last year's deadline for a Tyler Rogers who's no longer here. This is what's setting the stage for Carson Benge. And what is different about Carson Benge than all the other players we just discussed? The simple response is the following. Benge has been and clearly is, from coming out of college, the most polished. He undoubtedly looks the most polished, and he has looked the most comfortable. There is a greater expectation of power implementation with someone like him than even PCA when he was starting, because PCA was a guy that many people wrote off and said, oh, he's just going to be a defensive dynamo, but he's going to have a noodle for a bat because he doesn't really have much size and stature to himself. Well, he's been proving that wrong. I know he struggled in the second half last year, but looked like an MVP caliber player in the first half for the Cubs. So it's been a long time to finally get to the Mets having a homegrown outfielder, but I think it's fitting that the baton has really been officially passed, in my eyes, from Brandon Nimmo, who was the longest tenured Met here in many ways, to now Carson Benge. And I think the Mets are going to be staying true, as they told Brandon Nimmo, and that recent piece here at the Post with you guys, that, Nimmo stated how they were really bullish on Carson Benge's value to the organization and that they wanted to make room for him and give him a chance to run. I think that this is holding true now. And who's also going to help him run? It's the guy that he's competing against, Dex, and that's Mike Tauchman, okay? Tauchman knows exactly what his role is, and that's why I advocated so heavily for him well before he was signed by the New York Mets. The fact that they got him on a minor league contract is crazy to me, and they just reap the benefits of him being a grizzled veteran of an outfielder, still a very quality one for what his role will be, but one that isn't overly desirable for teams until really get into the beginning of spring training. So the Mets were able to take advantage of that. And Tauchman, we've talked about his elite on-base ability. He's one of the best in baseball and limited sample sizes in that regard. But when speaking in recent interview, Tauchman has laid down the groundwork of how important it is to reflect and look at. He was once that young outfielder for the New York Yankees, just getting his career started, and he had so many veterans that were helping hands of him in his game. He looks at guys like Carson Benge and what he's doing, and he sees himself in so many of those ways. He knows his role. He knows he's not going to necessarily play every day. He knows that he's going to be around 300 to 350 or so plate appearances. That's okay for him because he's been doing this the past number of years. So I think this is just a beautiful blend of having a high rising prospect that's ready on the cusp of breaking out, and a veteran that instead of maybe could handle a competition and, I'm just going to focus on myself and do my own thing. Cough, cough, Harrison Bader, 2024 New York Mets, Tyrone Taylor.
Right.
It'll be a different circumstance this time around. Yeah. And that, too, is what has me excited because I do anticipate they're both going to comfortably be on this roster to begin the season. What's your thoughts on that?
No, well, I think, for one, if you had asked Mets fans in December, would you be excited about Mike Tauchman being on the team? Most people would probably like, no. We're not. And to some degree, Wardy, even probably a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about Tauchman and Benge, people were probably like, why is Wardy excited about Mike Tauchman? Well, sometimes on teams you need a professional. A professional matters, especially when you have the support. And you just talked about the Mets really believing in Carson Benge. And they're really I don't want to say put their money where their mouth is because they haven't invested a whole lot into him yet, but they've really shown that by the opportunity they've given him and the support that I was talking about. But how do you support a young player? This is why what you're talking about with Mike Tauchman matters, right? You get a guy like that, 108 OPS plus over the past 3 seasons. You got to love that. And then here's what also he provides that I like that is going to help Carson Benge as well, too. He's got a little bit of versatility. He's played some center field. He can't just play right. He can only just play right. He can give you some time in center. He played 81 games there 2 seasons ago, right? He played 15 games there last year. That was 81 games in 2023, 15 games in 2024. So he's had some time of doing that, and that does help this Mets team. So if Luis Robert Jr. is not healthy, you need to put him in center field, or you need to put Benge in center field and then put Tauchman in right. You can do that. He's a professional. He gets on base. He can produce. He knows his role. That is huge, what you said. He's not a guy coming here saying, I'm trying to do my own thing. I'm trying to make sure that Carson Benge doesn't succeed. No, he's going to be invested in him succeeding because if he succeeds, the team succeeds. If he's a professional and does his job and gets his 350 at-bats or so and does what he's supposed to do, plays to the back of his baseball card the last couple of years, then the team is going to absolutely be successful. So you need guys like that. I think oftentimes, Wardy, we think too much about, let's get this guy. Let's get this high-priced guy in and have this backup. And it's like, no, you need the Mike Tauchmans of the world sometimes because they stabilize a team. They can help a young player like Carson Benge reach his potential because he's seen some things. He had his vets when he was coming up with the Yankees. Now, as you said, he's being that vet for this young player that the Mets are very high on. And you know what? When you're somebody, and I mentor people in this industry, when you mentor people and they've got the right attitude and professionalism, that matters a ton because now you want to go the extra mile for them. You want to see them succeed. And so I think that's going to help a lot. The relationship of those two guys is going to be really interesting to watch. And I think if Carson Benge, if we see him have a lot of success, Mike Tauchman's going to have something to do with that. And he's very valuable. And look, Mike Tauchman, injuries is happening, could be very valuable for this Mets team. He's a guy you could trust if he needs to fill in for somebody for, let's say, a week or two, and you won't feel bad about it. That's a good thing.
Exactly. Having that kind of depth is very important to begin the season, especially when, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, the construction of the Mets bench now, they went from having, no options in the outfield to what kind of feels like maybe a poor man's embarrassment of riches, but still a good thing. You have an abundance of options now between Benge, Tauchman, Batty, who we're going to talk about here, as well as, of course, you have Tyrone Taylor, who's had a very strong spring and brings elite defensive base running upside. I will not at all be surprised if the Mets bench to begin the season is configured where you have 3 outfielders on there, essentially, and then you have, say, 1 infielder. I do believe that's the route they're going to be going down right now. So if, say, Carson Benge is the opening day right fielder, Mike Tauchman coming off the bench because Polanco maybe is at DH to begin the first series against Skeens. Could be at first, but we'll see. So you go with the idea that you're going to have Talkman, you're going to have Tyrone Taylor, you're going to have there's one more player in that mix that I'm blanking at the moment. I apologize. Not 3 outfielders, 2, because you have Luis Torrens as that final bench piece as your backup catcher. And then right now it would be Mark Vientos as that infielder. But, before we talk about Vientos and we talk about those things, I do want to know if you have anything that you would like to share on that briefly.
No, it's funny because I was going to go to Vientos, and I'm like, are we sure that he's making the team right now? Or are we really? Because look, I'll just say this really quickly. If they're going with, you're saying 2, just to be clear, Wardy, you were saying 2 outfielders on the bench? So you're saying
2 outfielders on the bench.
On the bench. So you're saying they would keep Talkman and keep Tyrone Taylor. I think there's a strong case for that. Obviously, Taylor's got the versatility too in the outfield. He can play all 3 outfield positions. So that's really dope there. But here's the thing. He's actually been hitting well in spring training, Tyrone Taylor, that is, hitting 292. So you got to like that. I, too, think they would do that. I'm sure there are going to be fans that say, oh, well, how are you only going to go with 1 infielder? Now, you mentioned Polanco, who we know was going to play some first base, but probably some DH as well, too. But here's the thing. This is where the versatility matters. Batty, and I'm sure we'll get to him, too, his versatility and what he can do as primarily a utility guy. And that's what you're looking at him right now. He might even play a little bit of outfield. We may see him in right field a little bit at times this season. That's what allows you to do this. This is what allows you to carry 3 outfielders. That's the point right there. And I think the Mets can do that. If the Mets need to make moves down the road, they will. I don't get too married with the opening day roster. I think sometimes people make too much of it.
Oh, for sure.
Just too much is made of it. And this goes in any sport. How your roster is at the start of the season doesn't mean it's how it's going to look in September. Granted, you get there, you're playing meaningful baseball, right? So let's pump the brakes. They can carry 3 outfielders. Who cares? Tyrone Taylor, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a second, has earned it in my eyes right now. We're talking about who's earned it. I'm going with Tyrone Taylor there because the guy you mentioned, Mark Vientos, I don't know about earning is not the word I would put next to Mr. Mark Vientos right now.
Well, let's just hop right into our deeper Mark Vientos discussion, right? Because it makes sense. No need to go to a player in the outfield and then go back to them. We can talk about that individual after we talk about them real quick. So Mark Vientos, who has unfortunately had a very bad spring training thus far from a results standpoint. Not that he has prepared poorly or anything along those lines. The results just have not been there, as Carlos Mendoza has reiterated to the media for the past day after he went 0 for 4 in yesterday's Mets matchup. He's, as we know, batting under 100 so far this spring. And when he played for Team Nicaragua, he didn't really do anything else there either, as in 38 plate appearances across the WBC. He only had 3 singles. That was it. And then you look through 7 spring training games thus far, going back to this past Tuesday on the 10th, 22 plate appearances. He's just 1 for 21 with 1 extra base hit, 4 strikeouts, a walk, and 3 double plays grounded into. Not good. And I understand it's spring training, but you could also make the argument that because of spring training, you need to be performing here because you are competing. I don't think you being on this team is a lock. I never really thought that to begin with, because I never thought in confidence the Mets would be beginning the year with Ronnie Mauricio and Mark Vientos still in this organization. I thought at least one of them would be traded, which is what begs the question now. Should Vientos continue to not produce and you're having guys nip at the heels, like I mentioned in the infield with Ryan Clifford, with Jacob Reimer, and with some others in the farm right now, what's the game plan with Mark Vientos, who doesn't have any minor league options left on this roster? And if he, say, gets off to a really slow start this year and is a net negative instead of a positive, the Mets really going to give him a leash where he basically has little to no role, but just takes up a roster spot for the first month of the year, and then they DFA him for nothing? Because that's the route that we don't want to see happen, because that is a category that the Mets have sadly fallen into in the past, where they wait too long to part with a player when it was time to do so. And Mark's value is not great right now. So I understand the idea of trying to maximize it, still giving that an opportunity. But at the same time, if that doesn't go as planned, you will lose him for nothing. So what is the right thought process in your eyes, Dexter, as to how the Mets should be going about Mark Vientos and his future?
So people who know me will know that I'm very much on, sometimes when a sunk cost is a sunk cost, it's a sunk cost. And there's not much you can do about that. In an ideal world, you would love for the Mets to try to move Mark Vientos now. But Wardy, you just said it perfectly. What is his value? Who wants Mark Vientos? They just saw all the numbers that you mentioned. They've seen it. They watched him play with Team Nicaragua and only get 3 singles in 38 at-bats. They've seen the whiff rate be terrible through spring training thus far. The exit velocity is not there at all for him right now. So he doesn't have any value. Now, in an ideal world, you'd love to get something back from him. But what are you getting back for Mark Vientos right now? And then the question you asked is, okay, do you try to play him and put him on the opening day roster and let him play through this and see if he can build his value back up? Here's my question that I'm throwing back, and I'm throwing this out to everyone, you, everybody. What's the leash we're talking about for that? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? Do the Mets have time to play around with a month, especially coming off of what we saw in 2025? I'll tell you who doesn't have time to play around with this stuff. Carlos Mendoza. He doesn't have time for that. He's not trying to do all this at all whatsoever. So
that's a great point.
Right. And so when the Mets have to win games, let's just keep it a buck here. You know that, I know that, the Mets fans know that, Carlos Mendoza knows that. If he doesn't win games early, it's going to start to get late early and the noise is going to rise. And you do not want your manager managing out of fear of losing his job, right? This is not what you want. Or not being able to play his best 26 guys, have them on the roster. If you're playing with a guy who's a net negative for you all the time, that is hurting the team, right? So here's my answer to answer your question, because you asked me a question. And I'm very curious as what you would do too. Just cut your losses now, man. It's a wrap. It's not happening with Mark Vientos. Seen enough from last year, seen enough from spring. We can't turn the clock back to 2024. I say cut your losses. Would you like to get something for him? Sure. But I don't think it's going to happen. It is what he is. And some Mets fans say, Dex, well, what happens if he goes and signs someplace else? He signs with the Oakland A's, and then he starts raking it. So be it, so be it. There's nothing you can do about it at that point. All I know right now, based on the numbers, Wardy, he's not getting it done. And we've seen this for quite some time. And then the most important thing here is you don't have any place to play him. It's not like you can say, hey, we're going to plug him here. You can't. You can't right now. So to me, you just got to move on. Sometimes it is what it is, and that's where I am. It's just time to move on from the Mark Vientos experiment.
Brett Batty, who is a very good friend of his, is not doing him any favors in this regard.
No,
what I mean by that is
not.
Batty is so unbelievably talented from an athlete standpoint alone that him handling first base the way that he did today, with easily the best scoop and play that we saw from a low throw from Marcus Semien, he then ended the inning with a nice pop-up catch on the run off of first base. Batty just looks as comfortable as ever at that position, as he should, because first base is a less strenuous position than commanding the hot corner, which he plays brilliantly. I guarantee you, if Batty was playing third base right now, he'd probably be playing better defensively than Bichette, right? Then you look at second base. He might not be as good as Semien, but he's not really a liability overly there either. So it's like, okay, if Batty can handle right field the way that we've seen in limited stretches, if he can handle all these other positions, and he's clearly shown he can handle first, and if Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns have told us, the fans and the media, that, oh yeah, expect 500-plus plate appearances this year for Batty, where do you think he's getting the majority of that reps? It ain't going to be at DH because you want his defensive value. It ain't going to be consistently in right unless, A, injuries happen, B, inconsistencies happen, where it's like both Benge and Talkman just don't work out or something, or it's, something along those lines.
Or Bichette gets hurt in third or something, right? Exactly.
Something random. Other than that, or Semien could make level of sense, gain some reps at second, because Marcus isn't getting any younger. He might, play 2 or 3 games and say a series instead of playing the whole thing. Those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But first base is the clear path for Brett Batty to get the majority of his playing time this year. How many times did Jorge Polanco play at DH last year? Yes, 70% of the time. So this idea that Jorge Polanco's coming in and he's going to get at least 50% reps at first base, I'm not really buying that. I wasn't buying that when the Mets first signed him, and I'm not buying that now. I think Polanco will get first base reps, but it won't be a crazy amount as long as everyone's healthy. And I think Batty is going to continue to do what he's been doing and run away with the position between the two, because he can hit against lefties fine. He can hit against righties fine. He grinds out at bats. He has a perfect personality and attitude. And this is not a slight on Vientos, because I don't think he has anything wrong. I love Mark Vientos' attitude, as a matter of fact. I think he's carried himself very well in what has not been an easy go of it for him the past calendar year and a half. But to your point, cut your losses now. I do think that's something the Mets should still do. I've said it from the start of the offseason. They have to part ways with multiple infielders. They traded Luis Angel Acuna, who's
Mm-hmm.
batting like 429 right now in spring. Congrats to Luis Angel. I hope he continues out with the White Sox. That'd be awesome for him. Not losing sleep over it though. I'm just wishing him well. And
Same.
then you go from that to obviously still having your logjam of Mauricio, Batty, Vientos. There's got to be another domino that falls there. And then you see, okay, what's the value for Mark Vientos? I would venture to guess that the value of Mark Vientos right now is nothing greater than a reliever with a level of upside. So maybe it's a reliever that has stuff that the Mets can really work with, where actually he has shown levels of success at the bigs, or he has a lot of club control. Maybe he's a fiery fastball, touches 97 to 99, but has to work on the walk rate. That's where I kind of see this envisioning happening at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Because, do you want to have it where you're a month in the season and Mark Vientos doesn't take advantage of the limited opportunity he gets, brings you no defensive and base running value? There's literally nothing to argue as to why he should be on this team besides his track record from 2 seasons ago. That's what makes this more difficult. And you know what this just reeks of to me? And this is not, again, a slight to Mark. It's just my perception of this as a fan. And this feels like JD Davis all over again.
Oh
I mean, a
man,
guy that in
I have a
stretches
feel.
just shows you immense power,
Yeah.
made you want him to be in the lineup, but then became such a defensive liability where the bat was not outweighing the defensive woes.
Mm-hmm.
And the base running wise, he wasn't anything that you should be excited about. And Vientos is quite literally the slowest batter in the Mets lineup. Like he's not doing himself any favors.
No.
It's not his fault. It just he is who he is. He's a bat first player like Pete Alonso. And when these bat first
Uh,
players don't have the bat, they don't have anything else. And that's a problem, Dex.
yo, I'm with you. I'm with you on everything you said, and I'm glad you assessed what you think the value could be for him as a low A pitcher with high fastball, may possibly upside that needs to work on some control, right? If a team offered you that, if you were David Stearns and a team offered you that today, right now, they called you up, man, I'll do that deal so quickly. Because this is something you don't need to worry about. This is something you don't need to worry about going into opening day. Just move on. If you get something like that in a deal, I think that would be fantastic. Take it. Take it and run.
I think Mark needs this too.
Yeah, and sometimes, no, that's a great point. That's a great point, Wardy. Sometimes you just need to change the scenery. Sometimes you got to change some things up. For everybody, I think it's just best for everyone to move on. And I know you said it multiple times. I want to be very clear. I'm not shading Mark Vientos either. And I generally do not like when some people in the media, creators and stuff will say, oh, this guy's not even trying. No, Mark Vientos is trying. He is trying to be the best player that he can be. He has limitations. It does not work for this Mets roster at this time in the way that we are talking about their construction. I will never question somebody who's made it to the major leagues and has done something about their work ethic or their effort here. That is not what I'm doing at all whatsoever. I'm just saying this doesn't work for the Mets right now. Time to cut your losses. And honestly, Wardy, if the Mets cut him and they don't get any DFA him and they don't get anything for him, am I losing sleep over it? Not really. Honestly, not really. I think they'll be fine. I think you laid out perfectly. You started talking about what Polanco could bring and the 70% of his bats at DH last season, and Batty and his versatility. And you were saying all that, and I was listening to him. I said, "Oh, Wardy didn't say anything about Vientos and what he could do at all whatsoever." And I know you're not shading Vientos. You were just saying he doesn't have the value for this Mets roster as it's constructed right now. And I could not agree more. Would I have liked if they had traded him or Mauricio in the offseason? Yeah. I still think there's some fans that think Mauricio has a little bit more upside, particularly with the bat, and I would understand that, and I think this is why he should probably still stay in the system over Vientos, who obviously is out of options. But, yeah, it's just time, man. Sometimes it's just time, and in an ideal world, they could have got something, but it's just time. It's just time.
Yeah, and not having minor league options is the biggest issue with him. The Mets would have no problem sending him down, beginning the year in AAA, getting consistent reps there. But if they do that now, it's not a possibility. It's a guarantee he will get picked up because he's still young enough and has enough of a track record where there will be clubs, maybe not in as much of an immediate position to win, or maybe a team that is really looking for a true DH profile and doesn't really have anyone that brings a semblance of power. And they say, oh, this kid has power. He's had a lot of bad luck the past year and a half. Let's see what he can do for us, and then go on from there. So to be determined, but this was, again, a great back and forth. And to wrap it up on the position player discussions, let's just talk briefly because I want to hear your thoughts on Luis Robert Jr. making his spring training debut for the New York Mets. Mets fans love Robert. They hate Robert because I think they're just fed up with me gassing this guy up the past couple of years when he hasn't had consistent seasons before he landed in Queens. But I'm like a kid in a candy shop right now. Okay. Robert could just, have a infield dribbler and I'm going to be like, this is my World Series because I'm so happy he's on this team. The upside is immense with this individual. And I think this is going to be a fun ride, both up and down with Robert this season. So what's your initial impressions of what he's done thus far?
Look, listen, so far, it's a little bit like seeing Lindor in the first game. Just happy he's on the field and healthy, right? Like, that has to be the biggest thing here. But we know what he can do at the plate, and he's looked fine at the plate so far. He's looked healthy in terms of swinging the bat. The thing for me, and I talked about this in a previous episode, I'm very excited about what he can do on the base paths. If he can get on base with the bat, can have a good eye, draw some walks, I think he can really help this team. We know also how good he is defensively, and that is going to help this team. But for me, it's just the fact that he is healthy. And if this guy's healthy, then I think the Mets are going to be really fine defensively up the middle. And what he can do with the plate. If he gets anywhere back to where he was 3 seasons ago, right? If it's anything close to that, what was the number I said to you a couple weeks ago? 80%. We will sign for 80% of that, right? We will sign for that right now. But thus far, I think he's looked comfortable. He doesn't look like he's favoring anything because of an injury. I think more confidence will come for him with time at the plate. He's moving well. That's the key thing for me. You're not seeing any laboring of any kind with him, whether it's in the outfield or at the plate. So that's what I'm looking for in spring training. Can you look healthy? Are you moving well? Is the bat moving well when you're at the plate? Those things look good so far. And now it's just, knocking on wood here, stay healthy, right? Until we'll get to opening day and hopefully beyond. But I don't remember if you had said this or, we talked about our top 5 most important Mets, right, in the last episode, but he is a wild card for this team. Because if the highs are good and what we think could happen with him, Morty, you're going to be smiling. I'm going to be smiling. We both think this guy is really good. My colleague Joel Sherman had said to me the day after that trade was made, he said, this is the kind of risk you take if you're the Mets. This is the kind of player you go and get if you're the Mets for what they gave up for him, not a lot. This is the kind of risk you make because he can swing things so much for your lineup. And so I'm just excited to see him back on the field. Listen, he hits a dribbler and he doesn't get hurt. Yeah, I'm clapping too. Yeah, we love that, right? He gets on base. He shows us some of the speed that he's got there. He's played some Gold Glove level defense. We're cooking. So I just want this guy to be on the field so he can cook, and then we'll judge him from there. For right now, yeah, I like what we've seen from him so far.
The first baseball he struck this spring was 107 miles per hour. I was like, oh yeah, we're looking great. What did Carlos Mendoza say constantly in the backfields when he was doing minor league games and BP? He said, I think he's hit 40 home runs already. And he wasn't joking when he was saying that. He's like, I think he's actually hit more home runs than anyone else this spring in the backfields. Okay. And that just gives you a glimpse of what can be with Robert once we get to the flow of the regular season, because that 2023 year was the breakout. Yes. But we have seen these slivers of success, just not as consistently. But last year in the second half, leading to the trade deadline and onward, he had an 800 or higher OPS. He looked more than fine in a very bad Chicago White Sox lineup for the past number of years now, for the most part. So you also have to remember, yes, I understand as a fan, it's easy to write off a player ahead of time. I hear you. But the Mets are investing, not just taking on his salary at $20 million this year for a player that hasn't had an 800 OPS or higher throughout a full year since 2023, but they're really investing over $40 million with the 110% Cohen tax. So think about it. The Mets are investing an absurd amount of money into this man who very well could just be on a 1-year deal with us Why would they do such a thing? They're doing it because they know exactly how high that ceiling is. And if he gets close to that ceiling, it completely changes the dimension of the Mets lineup. You have as good of a 1 through 7, if not 1 through 9, as any that you're going to find not named the Dodgers in baseball currently. So that's the goal, and that's hopefully the expectation. But to be determined, obviously, to see how Robert looks as we get in the flow of the regular season. And speaking of the regular season, Dex, if there's one guy that I did not have on my bingo card that I would be excited to watch to begin the year, if you asked me 4 months ago, and now I'm actually getting giddy thinking about it, it's Kodai Senga. Like, I did
Oh
not think
yeah.
I was going to be saying this to you right now. And now Kodai Senga, my goodness, my God, my gracious. I mean, this is not only impressive to me, but there are certain things that he's doing, Dex, that he has not done in 2 calendar years. 2 calendar years. That is unbelievably notable. So, what has been your immediate reaction and impression of what has been nothing short of a very impressive beginning to spring for him?
Yeah, look, the beginning of spring training for Kodai Senga is impressive. I had him high on my list of most important Mets this season. You know, 2 spring training outings, 5 2/3 innings, 7 strikeouts, 3.18 ERA. There's going to be a lot of talk about the velocity, and that looks good. And I understand that's going to impress people. But for me, it's about what's he going to do with his pitches, and how is he going to put people away, and is he going to be able to get swings and misses? And he's been doing that thus far in this small sample size of 2 spring training starts. You got to like that 29.2 whiff rate percentage. I love that right now. He's getting guys to miss. That's what I want to see from Kodai Senga, because if he's doing that, Wardy, we brought up the C word a lot in the last episode. Confidence, 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 confidence. You got to see that out of Kodai Senga and some confidence there. And I think that's only going to build. When you have these, I'm not saying the velocity doesn't matter, people, because it does. The two things kind of go hand in hand. But if he's got the velocity and then he's got that whiff rate, making guys miss, that's only going to build his confidence. Because one thing we knew from him at the end of last season, that confidence was shot. He wasn't feeling good about himself. At the end of the year, he couldn't come back. He wanted to go and work on some things before he could help the Mets in the final week of the season, and then he didn't. So if that confidence is coming back from him, that is going to be huge for this Mets team. So again, this is going to become a theme for us with the Mets. If he's healthy, like Luis Robert Jr., right, and we're seeing him healthy, that is huge. But then it's about the performance. And when you get to the performance, he's putting it together. And I just think as he puts more of these quality innings together for the Mets as we get closer to opening day, that's going to be huge for him. But if he's getting guys to miss, that looks like rookie year Kodai Senga. That's what we all fell in love with him and what we saw, making guys miss. And it wasn't just about the ghost fork. It was him using all his array of pitches and really keeping batters off balance. And that's the thing you're seeing with him thus far in spring training. If he's able to continue that, he's going to be cooking too on the mound.
Oh, he's absolutely going to be cooking too. And, you talk about trying to stay healthy, referencing that as a Mets fan. That's like cheese and wine. They go so well together because we're so used to it, right? So
Yeah.
when we see Senga doing what he's doing, you mentioned this swing and miss. And I will double down on that and say not only how important the swing and miss has been, regardless of the fact that, you face like the Marlins B team. That's okay. He still won 3 awesome innings, 5 strikeouts, no hits, no nothing. But the velo is what sets up the swing and miss. And that's the most important thing here, okay? Because he did not have this velocity at all in the second half, especially last year. He only threw a couple pitches above 95, 96, and now he's touching 99 this spring. Like, that is ginormous because a lot of guys don't even get into that kind of velocity and workflow until more into the heart of the season. For him to be this good this early, pinpoint precision, dotting corners, and the fun stat that Erica did a fantastic job with that we can reference right here. Senga's only gone to a 3-ball count 2 times this spring. That's 2 out of the 19. You pair that with the fact that from his past game, how many of his ghost forks did he actually throw in the zone? 0. And he got all swings and misses for the most part,
That's
right?
impressive.
So getting those guys to bite while not putting anything in the zone is huge because he was throwing meatballs last year when he was at his worst. So bad that, again, when you had a fastball sitting in the low 90s, it doesn't set up your off-speed and breaking pitches. So when you need the ghost fork to be your put-out pitch, they are just going to wait until you're going to throw your meatball. They're just going to sit until you hang because they know that you don't have the comfortability, the confidence, nor do you have the fastball that's setting you up nearly as well as you were, where he'd have that in the back pocket. If he had to use that for strike 3 at any point, he would in 2023 in his rookie of the year / Cy Young caliber season with the Mets. Fast forward since then, he hasn't had that because of his lack of health and confidence. So Senga, if he at all can continue what we have seen getting into the season, the idea of Kodai Senga closer to his best than his worst, paired with Noel McLean and paired with Freddie Peralta, you quickly go from looking at a Mets rotation that was the biggest liability imaginable a year ago to all of a sudden, wow, this actually is a strength. Stay healthy. We all know that, but it really is a strength that we're seeing where you have multiple ace caliber pitchers. Mets did not have that luxury at any point last season. This is the game changer for them and gain the success that they need heading into the season. And not only is Kodai Senga a game changer, you go ahead, Dexter.
No, I want to say I 100% agree with that. I just wanted to give two other stats that our fantastic producer Erica Block gave that I thought was great. One, 0 walks in spring training right now. Zero walks right now in spring training. That is absolutely fantastic. And I talked about that whiff rate, 88 total pitches, 48 swings, 14 swings and misses, 12 balls in play. That's a pitcher using all of his pitches right now, feeling very confident and in control, right? And that goes with that other stat. He's only gone to a 3-ball count 2 times. Insane. Like, just, you got to be excited about it. I'm excited. Because I put him as the most important Met. So seeing him pitch this way in spring training, it's got me pumped, man.
It's making you feel good early.
Yes.
That's what it's making.
Now, we know things can change because we've watched the Mets. We know things can change, but early, you got to feel good about it. Sorry, go ahead, Woody.
No, you're good. We're only talking about more positives because Kodai Senga has been a headline that we've seen as of late. And you know who's also been a headline? The guy that I told you from the start was going to be an X factor for the Mets this year, and that's Tobias Myers. Okay? You talked about him. We've both had great conversations already. Myers just continues to impress this spring. It's easy to just fixate on Freddie Peralta, the charismatic personality. He hasn't stopped smiling in a couple months. I'm sure his cheeks hurt at least a little bit by now. And he's looked as good as he has by throwing the baseball. You can be enamored with that, while also appreciating the greatness that has been Tobias Myers to this point. And this is the fun conversation, Dex, because you have a Swiss Army knife here, right? You know, I was asked in my live stream earlier today, is Tobias Myers going to get over or under 8 starts this year? And it was a great question because he had 6 last year, didn't have great success, dominated as a reliever with a sub-2 ERA, but I could see him getting 8 to 10 plus starts this year. Justin Hageman, who could be utilized in a similar role from last year, is out long-term now with a broken rib fracture, which really, really sucks. I'm so sorry to hear that for Justin. But, you know, Tobias Myers, who had a role on this team, is for certain having a role on this team now. If there was any doubt or hesitation as to what the depth chart looked like with these kind of swingman pitchers. So not only has he looked great over his past, you know, just over the past week, he faced 10 batters, only 1 hit allowed. We're looking at 6 whiffs on 16 swings. Really, really impressive. He's pitched 8 innings of this far, has looked very sharp. Is Myers someone that you could see utilized in a way by the Mets this season where he becomes basically a fan favorite, where in any and every circumstance they throw him in, he's just continuing to have success?
Yeah, I could totally see it. You know, we talk about this a ton with the position players, but you like that versatility in your bullpen too, right? And a guy you can maybe slot into your starting rotation. Now, it's funny, that question you got asked in your live stream about whether or not over or under 8 starts, really good question. Do I want Tobias Myers to be making 8 starts? Because I feel like if he is making over 8 starts, that means something else has gone wrong that you might not like in the rotation. Possible, or something minor went wrong with your rotation and he came in and just pitched so well that you couldn't move him out the rotation. So I don't want to make it sound like it's all bad. So there could be good things with him. I think he's got that ability, and I think that's what matters here, Wardy, right? Like, he's got the ability, if you need him in that role, to do it. If you need him in relief to give you 2 innings, right? Let's say a starter keeps you in the game. You know, it could be Freddie Peralta. He only, you know, he's Mr. 5-inning guy. He only gives you 5 innings, and now you've got a 1-run lead, and you're trying to bridge it to the 7th, you know, or the 8th. He can give you 2 innings there, right? You feel good about that. A guy who could be solid in that, and he's got a strong arm. I think he could be that kind of guy, and I think Mets fans are looking for that kind of guy they can get behind, right? That, you know, is solid in relief, can give you some high leverage stuff. You know, you thought maybe Jose Butto, maybe not the guy that you could stretch out a little bit more, but he could have been that sort of 2-inning guy for you when necessary when he was on this team. I think Mets fans thought about that. So Tobias Myers can be that. And I think what we got to talk about with this, Wardy, is when they made the trade for Freddie Peralta, it almost sounded like, oh, I know Freddie Peralta was a headliner. And Tobias Myers kind of was an afterthought. But getting him in the deal was such a good move. I was excited about that David Stearns did this. I know you were excited about that. It's been an afterthought, but it may not be, to your point. If he comes in and really executes at his role, whatever that might be, you might look back at that trade and say, man, that was a good job by Stearns of making sure he got him in there, because not only did it fortify the bullpen, it also helped the Mets have some flexibility there. And if they need somebody that can give them a spot start here and there, they can do that. And that's huge. The F word, flexibility, not the other F word y'all thinking about, that's going to be used a lot for me during the season. And I think it's just so important for baseball teams where we are right now, modern baseball teams in 2026, to have that. You need that with pitching too. And Tobias Myers, he's looked good. He looks confident. And if he's pitching like this during the season, which I expect good things from him, Morty, it's going to be huge for this Mets pitching staff. Huge.
This is the same Tobias Myers that carved up the Mets in the 2024 wild card we're talking. Like this, he's not far removed from being able to be a big game pitcher in big moments, right? And he showed his ability to properly adjust on the fly as a more relied upon reliever last year from Milwaukee when the starts just didn't go his way. And the reason why I also mentioned the idea of him getting at least 8 starts, if not 10 plus, is not just because of injuries and inconsistencies, but I think of what plagued the Mets so much last year was the lack of length with starters. And that's likely going to continue to a degree this season. Why not have Tobias Myers used in certain circumstances where he comes in and pitches your first 3 or 4 innings, and then you have a piggyback situation where then you have, say, Shamania, if the velo still is not looking great, and maybe you only want him out there for 2 to 3 innings, have him come in there, like how he started last year when he returned from injury. His first outing out there, he was piggybacking with Clay Holmes, and he had success. So and that was in Kansas City, actually, and I do think he gave up a run towards the end, but he looked very solid for the most part in that outing, and that's just a way that the Mets can approach him in various ways. So I think the world's the oyster when it comes to Tobias Myers and his role for this team, because how Brett Batty is the ultimate Swiss Army knife of utility man offensively, Tobias Myers is that in the pitching department for this team.
I like that. I like that he's that Swiss Army knife for them in a comparison with Brett Batty. I think that's a good one. And I think if he's utilized like that in such a creative way, I just really think it's going to bode well for the Mets. I completely agree with you.
And if there's one pitcher that I feel very confident is going to bode well for the Mets, but it will not begin to start the season because he was just sent down to minor league camp, unfortunately, because I was really hoping he was going to break the team out of camp. But I understand the Mets have their reasons. They probably want to give the Grizzled veterans more of a look. And that's talking about Ryan Lambert, okay? Ryan Lambert has been brilliant this spring, and this is someone who we saw dominate as a closer in Double-A Bennington this past year, helping them win their championship. Now as we enter spring, lively fastball, consistently touching north of 99 on the gun, a lot of swing and miss that we've seen at this point. I've talked about this over the past couple of weeks, but I want to throw it to you. Do you think that there's a role where Ryan Lambert could potentially be a closer option for the Mets this season? Because I have a feeling he is going to be. It might just not be right away.
Well, here's the thing. The short answer is yes. If that happens or doesn't happen, Wardy, I mean, so much of that has to do, that means something's gone wrong with Devin Williams. Now,
somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, and when I say that, I don't, because we just talked about this last week, and you changed my mind a little bit on some things with Devin Williams that I was thinking, and Devin Williams wouldn't be here, and I agree with you. I've come around on this. He wouldn't be here if David Stearns didn't think he had the ability to pitch and knows him so well and all this good stuff. So I guess what I'm wondering right now in real time is just that if Ryan Lambert, who I love his stuff, right? I love his look. I love his makeup. He wants to challenge batters. This is the stuff we like out of somebody that should have that closing mentality, right? What's it going to take for him to get up here? Closing is strong because it's like, would Williams have to falter so much, or they would just see Lambert come up, maybe be in a 7th inning, 8th inning setup role, but the stuff just looks so good that you're like, all right, we can't have this guy in the 7th. We got to have him really at the back end of the bullpen. I would think there's a world I think he's going to come up and have an impact this year. I'm not going to say closing, but I think he's going to come and have an impact on the bullpen this year. What I will say is, I think could be great valuable experience for him taking on some sort of role in the bullpen and holding it down. So does he hold down the seventh inning, right? Does he hold down the eighth inning at some point? Does he learn behind Devin Williams? I think this. I just think his stuff is too good, and I think if other guys falter or are questionable in that bridge to Devin Williams, he could step up in that role. Now, my question back to you is, what does it look like for you if Ryan Lambert is up this season and closing for the New York Mets? Like, how do you see that going down?
So in that hypothetical, how I would see it going down is Lambert gets the closer spot because either A, Devin Williams does not pitch well for a period of time, or he just unfortunately goes down with an ailment. And then you basically shift everyone, meaning that Lambert goes and close after he looked very good getting opportunities in lesser leverage, starts to show it in higher leverage. Maybe also Devin Williams doesn't want to be used on back-to-back days by the Mets, but they need a closer out there. It's a tight ball game. Lambert hasn't pitched in 2 days. Bring him out there, see how he looks maybe against a lesser opponent, and then build it up from there. After you have him that closer spot, you shift everyone. So Devin Williams then can still be a closer for you, because this is the thing. I don't think the Mets are going to be stubborn with Devin Williams being the sole guy that gets closing opportunities this year. I think he will be their main option, but I don't think he will be their only option, because David Stearns is unbelievably creative and very diverse with his bullpen makeup typically. He's not stubborn where a guy needs to be there each time unless it was really Edwin Diaz. And even then, there were circumstances where they, well, of course, would have Edwin Diaz in non-save situations. So to have Lambert at closer, then Devin Williams as another closer / setup, and then that shifts Luke Weaver into more of a position where you don't have to utilize him in as much of the eighth inning. And typically you don't want to. Luke Weaver will probably profile best more in the seventh inning category for you this year than getting into that high leverage down the stretch. I mean, you have to make sure he stays healthy. He blames his injury last year for the lack of success when he had his worst moments with the Yankees last year, but he was giving up some meatballs when that was the case. And that's something the Mets cannot allow to happen there in the eighth inning, especially in tight ball games. They're going to need to be pretty anal about, where they're going to be fairly, stubborn as to, okay, if you don't look good for more than a couple outings in a row, we need to try to make sure that we at least have some other viable options to consider there. And that's where, again, the Lamberts come to mind. Then the Dylan Rosses come to mind. And then you think of the veterans that are competing for a bullpen spot right now, and the Huascar Brazabands. What was their role going to be? Craig Kimbrell, is he going to crack this bullpen, right? Ryan Hudson, the towering lefty, what is his usage going to be? Like, just a lot of things I know Mendy and Stearns need to configure. But Lambert, even though he was sent down to minor league camp, I think it's an absolute certainty that he will be a positive impact on the club this year. I really do.
Do you think that fans, because we've talked a lot about flexibility in these first couple of pods, man. Do you think fans want that? I welcome it. I welcome the flexibility. I welcome the flexibility everywhere. I think it's just good for your team today. But do you think fans want that flexibility at the back end of the bullpen, where it could be a little bit more situational of what you're talking about, Wardy? Or do you think? I think more fans like knowing this dude is the closer. He's coming in at this time. He's going to do this. I don't necessarily agree with that. But what do you think? What do you think about from what you're hearing from the fan base on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's both sides of the coin, right? There's definitely a large contingent of fans that love nothing more than like what we had with Diaz the past number of years. You knew that he was a certainty, and he changed the narrative after being so far from a certainty when he landed here in 2019. All the credit to him. Now, not so much. But now that the Mets have shifted away from Diaz or in a different position, I don't think that they're going to have that same level of stubbornness with Devin Williams, because I think there's a good contingent of fans that still have reservations with Devin Williams because of how his first half went last year in the Bronx. They hang on to those things too much. They hang on to the negativity from the media and the talking heads that make you think that, oh, this guy's terrible, when in reality, he's as good of a closer option as literally the best in baseball. Like, that's the category that he's typically in. So I don't think the largest contingency of fans are going to be viewing the closer spot that Devin Williams needs to be that guy. I think that they are more welcoming and open to having some versatility here, because at the end of the day, it just comes down to results, Dex, right? If the Mets have success by having multiple different relievers there closing, if anything, I think fans would love it, because then they're like, oh, who's going to close tonight? Like, okay, we have the next 2 out of 3 batters in the ninth. They're going to be lefties. Okay. Are the Mets going to go with, someone that has, better reverse splits? So maybe writing the bullpen, but handles lefties really well. Or like AJ Minter when he's here. There will be times where AJ Minter even gets closer opportunities too, just because of situational circumstances, matchups, those kind of things. So to your point, yeah, I think that is not only something that's going to continue to happen, but I think fans will embrace it because that kind of versatility is good when you have quality. It's not good when you just have quantity. So
Yeah.
that's the hope that the Mets have something good going this season.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it may take people some time getting used to, but I think it'll be better for the team overall. And like you said, you're right. At the end of the day, it's 100% facts by you. It comes down to winning. If they win with it, nobody's going to be talking about it. Nobody's going to really care. They're going to be like, oh, this is great. We've got versatility and we're getting W's. That's what's going to come down to. So we'll see. We shall see.
So you said W's. Let's
Yeah.
add a B and a C, and let's wrap this up talking about
Good
the World
segue.
Baseball Classic, okay? There
Good.
you go.
That's
So
good.
Juan Soto is facing Team USA tonight. Unfortunately, that's the only downside to us recording this now because we don't know the result yet. However, we can appreciate what has happened to this point. Such an entertaining tournament. I mean, seriously, like if you're just a baseball fan, how can you not be appreciating how fun, how entertaining these games have been, from Italy taking down Puerto Rico to Venezuela taking down Japan and what many believe was a massive upset, to now having Juan Soto for Team DR just absolutely kill it so far when he has been out there, just like so many other tremendous batters on that lineup. What's been your impressions of how Soto's looked, and previously when we saw a little bit of Clay Holmes and McClain?
So in terms of Soto, he, there was so much talk about whether or not he was comfortable in the Mets clubhouse last year, Wardy, which, we talked about, much to do about nothing, in my opinion. But he looked so comfortable with his boys, his Dominican brothers down there. And that I would be comfortable too if I had that much protection everywhere in that lineup. I'd feel very comfortable. And they are raking the ball. They're such a fun lineup to watch, and that's why I can't wait to see what they do against Team USA tonight. But like, Soto's looked good. He's looked comfortable. You and I both expect big things from him offensively this year. We both talked about him going 40-40 this year. I don't think the base stealing was an aberration for him last year. Antoine Richardson being here or not, I still think he's going to put up great numbers in that regard. Soto's a tremendous player. I thought he would be more comfortable in year 2 than year 1. I always thought that. I just think it looks even more now. I do think something like the WBC, even for the people out there that hate on the WBC, it is something, it's going through spring training, it is something that you can build upon, right? And I do think that matters in a way for players like him just getting ready. So I expect him to come back to New York with the Mets and be refreshed and ready for the start of the season. And it wouldn't shock me if he got off to a faster start this season than we saw in previous years, the previous year for him, where it was a lot slow and he's adjusting to things. I think that'll be good. McClain, he's looked okay, thus far. His numbers in his start that I was pulling up here, he had the one game, he had 14 batted, 55 pitches, 2 hits, 2 runs. It wasn't great for him. You did see the 4-seam fastball velo clocking at 97 miles per hour, so that's good to see from him. Am I taking too much away from that? He had some quality contact that he gave up. 2 guys. I'm not taking too much from him. I like that he was competing. I like that he was on this team going up against some of the best hitters in the world. I think that's a good experience for him as well too. We talked about Vientos before. He has really done nothing for Nicaragua with just 3 singles. So you have that there. But I think Soto, to me, is the real standout that you should be encouraged about if you're a Mets fan. And look, just seeing him play, no matter what happens with Team DR, just seeing him play with that joy and then bringing that joy back into the Mets clubhouse. That's a good thing, right? Because you know what's going to happen, Wardy. You know this is going to happen already. You could put it down, you put money in it. The Mets, they're going to have a little losing blip or streak at some point in the season. Hopefully it's not longer than 3 games, but sometimes that happens. If that happens, people are going to say, what's going on in the clubhouse? Is something fractured? Is something going on? Do the Mets players not like Wardy and Dex when they come in the clubhouse?
The first thing that'll happen is our friends here at the New York Post with the fat headline, "What's wrong?" That's what it'll be. That's 100%, and understandably so. I get it. Like, that's the market that we're in. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you know what? To go back to a point you made before, my friend, winning winning cures everything with that, and good play, cures that. So I think for me, when I'm watching Soto here in the WBC, and just talking about him particularly, and, we've seen this a lot in talks about the WBC and how players carry it and whether it matters, but we've seen it from the Latino brothers who have been playing in this tournament. They've been playing with a lot of joy. And, I think that's beautiful to see. I love the WBC. I think it's beautiful to see. You see what it means to these guys. You see what it means to the Dominican team. You see what it means to Soto. They want to win for their country. They want to put on for their country. And, when he's back in blue and orange, he's going to put on for the Mets, and I expect him to put on for the Mets in a major way. I know you like the WBC too, so what do you think about what you're seeing from Soto? Because he's killing it at the plate.
Just the fact that he's doing the shuffle and rounding the bases, like jumping and hitting bombs and like screaming at the dugout right away, pounding his chest, just like the home run he hit in the ALCS for the Yankees in 2024. Like that gets me so amped up because that's what we've been wanting to see. Like we saw Juan Soto put up on paper an amazing season, a historic season because of the stolen bases added. But when we reflect from the 2025 Juan Soto season, how many moments of Juan Soto doing his thing felt like he was charismatic or felt like that he was showing a level of personality other than just showing up and going to work? It really felt like it was him putting on a suit and tie and just doing his typical 9 to 5, and that was that. Doesn't feel like this time around. And a big difference is this is his team now. It's completely his team.
Yep.
There's no egos that come with the Pete Alonsos, the Jeff McNeils, and this selfless, who I love, but still falls in the category, the Brandon Nemos. Changing that core into what it is now, where it is built around Soto and Lindor, is what is going to make Soto be as extroverted as he's ever been in his career. I don't think people understand Soto is going to show comfortability over the next number of years with the Mets that he has never shown in his career outside of playing for Team DR. He's never been in a position where he's known that he's been homebound long term. Since a young age in his early 20s, having Scott Boras in his ear, the expectation was that you're going to wait until you hit that market and you're going to do what's best for you and your family. That was always the focus. It didn't matter what destination he was at prior. It always came down to who is going to be my long-term commitment. And now that he has that with the Mets, and now that he has year one under his belt in Flushing, Queens, and having the success that he did, and now the Mets have built a roster more catered to him. He's very good friends with Luis Robert. He knows Jorge Polanco very well, fellow Dominican player too. Even though that they did not bring Starling Marte back, they did a very good job by bringing in players that bring you more immediate upside, and guys are going to help build what is now this new core. So do I think that, again, you need all these Latino players to get a proper environment? No, I'm not saying that at all, but It doesn't hurt, especially when they're as like-minded as they are and they're as charismatic as they are, and their mentality and how they approach the game, there are similarities. It's good because that helps bring camaraderie. That's what is helping bring a clubhouse culture that will give you a playoff type atmosphere in ways throughout the season where you never got last year, even when things were going good for the Mets. It really never felt that way. It never felt like they had the fun vibe the way that you had with OMG in 2024. And that was a miracle run for the Mets in hindsight. How do you build these things sustainably and consistently? It's not by banking on fun little stories and running with them. No, it's by building a foundation of players that are going to do this on a day in, day out basis that is not just going to be for, a sliver stretch period of time. So I'm bullish on this team, if you couldn't tell by now. And I really do believe that this team is going to be. I'm not going to spoil predictions when it comes to wins because I'm sure we'll do that in another segment for another day. But they're in very much a position to have far more success than what they had last year. I'd say that's the minimum.
I would agree. I'm intrigued to see when we get to predictions, which will be soon, people, what the predictions are and how much more successful than last year you think this team could be. But, I think, again, I keep saying, I think fans should feel good about this team. I do feel like the vibes from fans around this team are much different than it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And I think you just talked about Juan Soto having the comfortability in where he is now in year two in Flushing, but also David Stearns having the time to actually finally really mold the team into the way that he's wanted to. I really always look like this is kind of really year one of that because, he was taking and tearing down from the previous couple of years. And now we're really going to get to see that. And I'm not saying I know that it's going to work because, excuse me, I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. We hope so, but we'll see. But he deserves a chance to be judged. Him and Carlos Mendoza, I'm going to put them together on the team that they want and the way that they want it to be built and how they want to play baseball. And now we got to see if that's winning baseball.
Absolutely. And when it comes to winning baseball, I know I'll be there. You're going to be there. We're going to be attending a lot of fun wins at Citi Field this year. So, Dex, I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. This was a fantastic discussion. I hope you guys watching at home or wherever you're watching this enjoyed our latest Straight Outta Flushing podcast covering the New York Mets here officially for the New York Post. That is Dexter Henry. I'm Tyler Ward. Dex, anything that you would like to leave the people with before we get out of here?
No, man. Just want to leave the people with keep watching, keep supporting me and Wardy. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, all the good stuff. Keep the good vibes going. Keep the comments coming for us as well, too. We'll try to answer a lot of comments and questions for you guys. That's all I got to say. Let's go Mets. Not much more than that.
Let's go Mets. See you guys next time.
Peace.